Kentucky. Late October. The kind of night that swallows headlights whole. A two-lane highway cuts through the dark hills east of Harlan. Empty, wet, the yellow lane lines dissolving under 3 hours of rain. No traffic. No sound except water on asphalt and wind moving through the tree lines on both sides like something breathing. Then, a pair of taillights, hazard lights, blinking slow on the right shoulder, patient, waiting. A truck slows, pulls over. A man steps out into the rain, worn jacket, work boots, the hands of someone who fixes things for a living. He crouches beside a flat tire on a luxury SUV that has no business being on this road at this hour. He reaches into the wheel well, stops, looks closer. Something is wrong with this tire. Not the kind of wrong that happens by accident. The kind that was put there. And somewhere down that dark highway, headlights, coming fast, 3 of them. Thursday. The last Thursday of the month. Which meant Caleb Merritt had exactly $42 in his checking account, 3 invoices still unpaid, and a 9-year-old girl sitting by the kitchen window counting the minutes until his headlights showed up in the driveway. He knew this because Sophie told him, every time, without fail, with the specific patience of a child who had decided that honesty was more useful than pretending not to notice things. The garage sat at the edge of Harlan, Kentucky. Not the pretty edge, the other one. The one with the gas station that hadn't updated its sign since 2009, and the diner that closed on Tuesdays for reasons nobody had ever satisfactorily explained. Caleb locked up at 7:53, hands still dark with grease he hadn't bothered to fully scrub off. He'd be back at it tomorrow morning. The grease knew that too. 3 jobs today. A transmission swap that took 2 hours longer than it should have, because the previous owner had apparently attempted to fix it himself using optimism and the wrong size wrench. Brake pads on a minivan, whose owner stood over him the entire time asking questions. Not helpful questions, just questions. And a busted radiator hose on a truck belonging to a man named Earl who paid in cash and left without saying thank you. Which was fine. Caleb didn't need thank you. He needed the $40 Earl had handed him, which now sat in his shirt pocket next to a gas receipt and a folded drawing Sophie had made last week. She'd drawn the 2 of them standing in front of a house that was considerably nicer than their actual house. She'd labeled it Our House Future. He kept it in his pocket because he was that kind of father. The kind who carried folded drawings. The kind who couldn't throw things like that away even when the paper got soft at the creases. He called her before pulling out of the parking lot. She picked up on the first ring, which meant she'd been holding the phone. How much longer? 30 minutes. Silence. The silence of a 9-year-old choosing her words with care. Dad. You said 30 minutes last Tuesday and it was 45. This time I mean it. You always mean it. Sophie, Mrs. Paulson went home already. I heated up the pasta. It's a little overcooked because I didn't know exactly when you were coming. And I didn't want it to get cold, but then it got overcooked and now it's kind of just a situation. Caleb leaned his head back against the seat, smiled at the ceiling of his truck. I'll be there before 9. It's already 8, then I'll be fast. Another silence, different from the first one. Okay, she said. The way she said things when she'd decided to trust him and was still a little nervous about it. He drove. The rain started somewhere around mile marker 14. Not politely, not gradually, just rain, all at once. The kind that turns headlights into smears and makes the yellow lane lines disappear and reminds every driver on the road that the road doesn't particularly care about their plans. Caleb turned the wipers to high, watched the water streak sideways across the windshield, thought about the pasta situation at home, thought about whether he had bread, thought about the invoice he still needed to send to a man named Hutchins, who'd been avoiding his calls for 2 weeks and owed him $300 that Caleb could genuinely use right now. He did not think about stopping. Not at first. The hazard lights appeared in his peripheral vision like an afterthought. Yellow, blinking, patient on the right shoulder, maybe a quarter mile ahead. He registered them the way you registered things on a dark highway. You saw them. You logged them. You drove past them because you had somewhere to be, and it was raining and it was past 8 and your daughter was sitting at a kitchen table with overcooked pasta. He drove past, 40 yards, 50. He exhaled through his nose, pressed the brake, sat in the rain with his blinker going. Because he was this kind of person, who always did this, who had tried many times over many years, to become the kind of person who kept driving. And it failed. Every single time. You're a problem, he told himself. And put the truck in reverse. The car on the shoulder was a current year Suburban. Black. Immaculate, except for the flat rear left tire that had given up somewhere between ambitious and catastrophic. It sat like a very expensive inconvenience. Water ran in sheets off the hood. The hazard lights blinked, blinked, blinked. The woman standing next to it wore a coat that cost more than his truck. Not figuratively. He was almost certain. She was tall. Mid-40s, maybe a touch older. She held herself the way certain people did, like the room adjusted when she walked in, not the other way around. One hand held a phone to her ear. The other gripped the edge of her coat closed against the wind. She watched him pull up with an expression doing considerable work trying to be neutral. He stepped out, got immediately reined on. Walked toward her. She looked him over, took in the grease-stained jacket, the worn boots, the general presentation of a man who had been doing physical labor since approximately 7 that morning. Something moved across her face, assessment or alarm. Possibly both. Are you planning to help me, she said, or were you going to rob me first and then help me? Because either way I'd like to know the order. Caleb stopped walking, looked at her. I've got a jack in the truck, he said. That's not a denial. It's also not a threat. It's a jack, you've got a flat, you want help or not? She watched him for another second, then she stepped to the side, just slightly, which he took as a yes. He went back to the truck for his gear. The thing about changing a tire on the side of a wet highway at 8:15 at night is that it's not complicated. It's just unpleasant. Cold water down the back of your neck. Gravel pressing into your knees. The occasional passing truck sending spray across the shoulder like it's making a personal comment about your life choices. Caleb didn't mind. He'd worked in worse places. He tried not to think about that too often. But it was true. And his knees remembered. He crouched beside the rear wheel. Set the jack. Started loosening the lug nuts with the steady economy of someone who had done this enough times that his hands knew the sequence before his brain issued the order. The woman had moved back toward the car and was talking quietly into her phone. Not a personal call. Her posture was too straight for that. Too controlled. Business, then. Something important enough to keep going in the rain on the shoulder of a highway in eastern Kentucky. He worked. And because he was who he was, and because certain habits don't leave you, no matter how hard you try to bury them under invoices and school pickups, and a life that was supposed to be simpler than the one before, he noticed things. The tear in the sidewall caught his attention when he pulled the flat tire free, just a flicker at the back of his mind. A wrongness that didn't announce itself. He tilted the tire slightly, looked closer. The cut was clean, too clean. Road debris tears rubber in jagged, outward-facing edges. Chaotic, uneven, the violence of something unexpected. This was different. The cut ran along the lower sidewall with a straightness that required an instrument. Not an accident. Caleb set the tire down. Said nothing, not yet. He reached for the spare, but now he was looking. Now the part of his brain he'd tried to put on a shelf 9 years ago, when Sophie came into the world and Claire left it, that part was awake. And it was not interested in going back to sleep. His eyes moved to the brake assembly behind the wheel mount. A small thing. 3 inches of brake line visible where the wheel had been, coated in road grime, because everything on the undercarriage of a car gets coated in road grime after highway miles in rain. Except there was one spot, small, the size of a thumbprint, where the coating was gone, where the line was clean, almost bright. Rain hit everything evenly, had been hitting everything evenly for a while. That section should not have been bright. Someone had wiped it recently, deliberately. Caleb sat very still for a moment. Then he picked up the lug wrench and went back to putting on the spare. He didn't say anything yet, because saying something before you're certain creates panic, and panic on the side of a dark highway was useful to no one. He'd learned that in a previous life he didn't discuss in polite company, but his hands had gotten very careful. He was torquing the last lug nut when the SUVs arrived. 3 of them, black, new from both directions, which was theatrical enough that for one disorienting moment Caleb thought he was misreading the situation. Then the doors opened in that synchronized way, the way of people who had rehearsed this, who had done this before, who moved with the controlled economy of professionals trained to secure a space before they'd finished assessing what was in it, and he understood he was reading the situation exactly right. Men in dark clothing stepped onto the shoulder. The one in front was around 45, broad through the shoulders. He moved with the authority that came from either law enforcement or military or both, and he was already looking at Caleb the way you look at a variable you hadn't planned for. He walked directly toward Caleb, stopped 3 feet away, stepped back from the vehicle. Caleb set down the lug wrench, stood up slowly, raised his hands to about shoulder height, the casual version, not the surrender version. The jack still loaded, he said. Weights on the left rear axle. Move it before I release it and you'll shift the balance on a wet shoulder. The man stared at him, step back. Caleb took 1 step back, not 2, 1. He kept his hands where they were. Rain hit the back of his neck and ran down under his collar. He was thinking, somewhere underneath everything else, about Sophie and the pasta and the fact that it was now 8:22. The woman in the expensive coat appeared beside the man and said his name, Owen, in a voice that had said it many times before in exactly that tone. Owen looked at her. Something passed between them. Then he looked back at Caleb. Who are you? Guy who stopped to change a tire. How did you know she was here? Hazard lights. Were you following the vehicle? Caleb looked at him steadily. I was driving home. I saw a flat on the side of the road. I stopped, a beat. Same thing most people would do. Except apparently there are enough people who want to hurt this woman that you responded to a tire change with 3 vehicles and armed men. Owen's jaw tightened. The woman spoke quietly. Let me talk to him. Ma'am, protocol says. I know what it says. Direct. Precise. Not unkind exactly, just assessing. You were changing the tire, almost finished. 1 more lug nut. And, he looked at her, then at Owen, then back at the wheel. I need you both to look at something. He crouched again beside the rear wheel, not touching, just pointing. The sidewall, he said. Look at the cut. Owen leaned in despite himself. He was a professional. He couldn't help it. The cut was visible now that the tire was off and the shoulder light hit it at the right angle. A clean line along the lower sidewall. Not jagged, not random. Road debris tears differently, Caleb said. It's chaotic, unpredictable. This was made with something straight, something sharp. Someone weakened this tire before she drove on it. Owen, that could be. Look at the brake line. A pause. Owen leaned further, saw the bright spot on the line, the place where the grime was gone. A long silence. The kind that meant the other person had just seen what you needed them to see. Someone wiped it, Caleb said. Recently. Before the rain reached it or they wiped it after. Either way, that section should be dirty. It's not. The woman straightened. Her voice was completely level. The voice of someone who had trained herself over many years to sound exactly like this. What does the brake line mean? Could mean nothing, Caleb said. Because he was honest, always had been. Could mean someone made a small cut in it. Small enough not to lose pressure immediately. Big enough that at highway speed, over distance, you lose braking ability at exactly the wrong moment. Owen was already on his radio. Terse. Efficient. 2 of his men moved immediately, one going flat under the frame with a flashlight. 20 seconds. The man under the car said something low and careful. Owen crouched to hear it. When he stood back up, his face had changed. He looked at Caleb the way people looked at you when they were revising something they thought they already understood. Steel insert, Owen said. Wedge cut. Sharp edge facing the sidewall from inside the suspension mount. Caleb nodded once. Designed to finish what the cut started, he said. The weakened sidewall fails first. The insert makes sure the failure is complete. She probably had 20 miles on this tire, maybe 30, before the structural integrity went. The woman said quietly, the bridge curve. That would be the intended point, Caleb said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, Diana Ashford. She offered her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm and she didn't perform it. Caleb Merritt, he said. Something in her expression shifted, just slightly, like a door opening an inch to check the weather before deciding whether to open further. Then the white cargo van appeared on the opposite shoulder. No one saw it arrive. It was simply there, sitting in the dark past the barrier, angled in a way that gave it a clear sightline to Diana's Suburban, without catching the sweep of the convoy headlights. Caleb saw it. Didn't look at it directly. Don't react, he said quietly. Owen clocked it with a glance, kept his body still. They're not watching to see if it worked, Caleb said. They already know it didn't. The convoy is here. She's standing up. He kept his voice low and even. They're confirming, updating whoever sent them. Owen, very quietly, then we move on them. If you move on them now, the person who sent them knows their observation team was made. Within 30 seconds, everything changes. Caleb didn't look away from the wheel. Let them finish. Track the van from a distance after it leaves. Owen keyed his radio. Gave an instruction so quiet it barely reached Caleb. 200 yards down the shoulder, one of the convoy vehicles went dark. The van sat for 90 more seconds. Then pulled out, easy, unhurried. Like someone leaving a parking lot after deciding not to buy anything. The dark vehicle followed. Caleb turned back to Diana Ashford. "The stop before this one," he said. "The last time you got out of the vehicle." "How long were you stopped?" Diana didn't hesitate. 12 miles back, a gas station. I went inside to take a call. Maybe 10 minutes. "Was that stop scheduled?" A pause. Owen looked at Diana. Diana said, "No, I decided in the car." Last minute. Caleb stayed crouched, looked at the brake line, looked at the tire, looked at the wet pavement where the convoy vehicles had stopped. Then he stood up. Then whoever placed these devices knew about a stop that wasn't on the original schedule. He looked between them. Not accusatory. Just delivering information. They're not tracking the vehicle. They're tracking the itinerary. In real time. From inside. Owen's expression did something complicated. Not surprise. The more difficult thing, the expression of a man being made to look at a possibility he had been deliberately not looking at. Because looking at it meant something he wasn't ready for. No one spoke for a moment. Rain ticked against the convoy roofs. "You're coming with us," Diana said, not a question. Caleb looked at his truck 20 yards away on the shoulder. Engine off, rain beating on the hood. He thought about Sophie, about the pasta, about 8:22 becoming however late this was going to become. About the way she said okay in that voice when she decided to trust him and was still a little nervous about it. He pulled out his phone, held up one finger to Diana, walked back to his truck, sat inside, dialed. Sophie picked up on the first ring. Again. "You're not 30 minutes away," she said, before he could speak. "I know, how do I know that?" "Because I'm calling instead of just showing up." A pause, the sound of Sophie thinking. Did someone break down? Caleb looked through the windshield at Owen repositioning his team. At Diana Ashford standing in the rain, phone back at her ear, already making the next call. "Something like that," he said. "Are they okay? Working on it?" "Dad, yeah. Don't do the thing where you say an hour and it's actually 4 hours." "I know, Sophie, you literally. Keep the front light on," he said. "I'll be home." She went quiet. Then, quietly. "Okay," he hung up. Sat for a moment in the silence of the truck. Here was the thing about stopping. Not the dramatic version of it. Not the version where a person sees something clearly and steps forward with their jaw set and their eyes open. The actual version, where you have $42 in the bank and pasta waiting at home, and you pull over anyway because your feet turned around before your brain finished the argument. Because that's who you are. Because once you see the trap, you can't drive away from it. You can tell yourself it's not your problem. But the trap is still there. And whatever happens next is going to happen whether you're nearby or not. The only variable is whether someone who understands it is in the room. He grabbed his tool bag, got out of the truck, walked back through the rain. Owen watched him approach. Caleb said nothing. Just picked up the bag and looked at him. Owen gave a short nod, turned toward the lead vehicle. The convoy engines came to life around them. And somewhere behind him, on the wet shoulder of a Kentucky highway, the car he'd come to fix sat dark and quiet. The trap still hidden in its frame. The evidence already photographed. The people already moving. Caleb Merritt didn't know yet what the next several hours would cost him. He knew what not stopping would have cost someone else. And that had always been enough. The convoy moved. The rain continued. Sophie's front light stayed on in a house 10 miles away. Patient, small against the dark. The convoy moved south at 35 miles an hour. Which felt, to everyone in the lead vehicle, like moving through wet concrete. Owen drove. Caleb sat passenger. Diana sat directly behind Caleb, close enough that he could hear the quality of her silence. Controlled, deliberate. The silence of someone running calculations they weren't sharing with the room. They'd been stopped on the shoulder for nearly 2 hours before moving. Owen had insisted on it. Full mechanical inspection of every vehicle in the convoy. Undercarriage, brake systems, fuel lines, electronics. Nothing moved until Briggs, Owen's logistics analyst, confirmed clean on all 4 vehicles via remote diagnostic. Then another 30 minutes while Owen coordinated with Kentucky State Police on the cargo van that had been tracked to the warehouse district and established a secure communication channel for the route ahead. Then 15 more while Diana made the calls she needed to make, standing outside the lead vehicle in the rain, voice low and steady. By the time they pulled onto the alternate route, it was past midnight. Outside, the rain had eased from violence to persistence. The highway was empty in both directions, just wet asphalt and tree lines and the occasional green exit sign catching the headlights before disappearing back into the dark. Caleb watched the road, not the mirrors, not the instruments, the road itself, the surface, the way water moved across it, where it pooled, where it ran clean. The shoulders, the tree lines, the geometry of the route as it unfolded ahead of them. Owen noticed after about 4 minutes. You always do that. Do what? Watch the road like it's going to tell you something. Caleb didn't answer right away. The honest answer was yes, always, since before he could explain why. Since a version of his life he no longer talked about, when reading a road wasn't a habit but a professional requirement. When understanding what a road would do to the vehicles traveling, it was the difference between everyone going home and no one going home. Habit, he said. Owen accepted that, because Owen was the kind of man who recognized certain answers for what they were, complete, even when they were short. The radio crackled. One of the rear vehicles checking position. Owen answered in the shorthand of people who'd worked together long enough that full sentences were a courtesy they'd stopped needing. Diana leaned forward slightly. How long to the alternate junction? About 8 miles, Owen said. 8 miles at 35. Caleb did the math without deciding to. 13, 14 minutes. Enough time for things to go wrong if someone had thought ahead. And someone had thought ahead. That was the part that kept pulling at him. Not the sabotage itself. Sabotage happened, he'd catalogued more of it than he could comfortably recall. What he kept returning to was the architecture, the layering. The tire weakened first, the insert to guarantee the failure, the brake line as the final measure. 3 mechanisms, 3 separate failure points, designed so that if one was found, the others would complete the job independently. That wasn't improvised anger. That was patience, planning, someone who had thought through contingencies, which meant they'd plan for the possibility that the first trap might not work alone. Which meant there was likely something else on this road. He didn't say this yet, he was still building the picture. And incomplete pictures, stated out loud, created noise. He'd learned that too. Diana's phone buzzed against her knee. She looked at it. Didn't answer, turned it face down. Owen glanced in the rear view. Do you need to know? One word. The kind that closed a door without slamming it. The phone buzzed again. She left it face down. Caleb kept his eyes on the road ahead and filed that away with everything else. Tell me about tomorrow's meeting, Caleb said. Not a demand, just an opening, left there for her to take or leave. Quiet from the back seat. Long enough that he thought she'd chosen to leave it. Then, the vote determines control of the Capital Allocation Committee. 5-year investment direction for the company. Flat. The voice of someone reading from a document they'd memorized. If it passes the way I've structured it, I have authority to open an internal audit on a series of investments from 5 years ago that were managed incorrectly, Caleb said. A pause. Someone made decisions that cost the company $40 million and then structured the paperwork so those decisions were unfindable without knowing exactly what you were looking for. And the audit makes them findable. Yes. And the person who made those decisions is currently on the board. Owen said nothing, which meant he already knew, which meant this wasn't new information to Diana's security team, which raised the question Caleb decided to ask directly. How long have you known it was someone on the board? Silence. Diana. She looked up, caught his eyes in the mirror. 3 weeks, she said. Caleb nodded, turned back to the road. 3 weeks. She'd known for 3 weeks that someone in her inner circle was concealing a financial crime. And now, the night before the vote that would force it into the open, someone had tried to kill her. And her security chief, professional, capable, clearly not careless, had not seen it coming. Because they'd been watching for threats from outside, not from the table. Owen, Caleb said. Yeah, the gas station stop. Your advance team swept the location before she arrived. Standard procedure, yes. Who on the advance team knew the stop wasn't on the original schedule? Owen's hand shifted on the wheel. The micro-movement of a man whose mind has just gone somewhere he didn't want it to. Reed, he said. Reed Callahan. He coordinates logistics. How long has he worked with you? 11 years, 11 years. Caleb let that sit without touching it. Because there was nothing useful to say about 11 years that made this easier. 11 years was the kind of time that stopped you from asking questions. That made trust feel like bedrock instead of a thing you maintained. Don't confront him yet, Caleb said. Owen looked at him. If he's passing information, the line is still open. Use that. Caleb kept his voice even. Give him a route update. Make it slightly wrong. See where the next problem appears. Owen stared at the road for a moment. You're asking me to run a false feed through one of my own people. I'm asking you to use the channel that already exists before whoever is on the other end decides to close it. A beat. If you confront Reed now, the person receiving the information goes dark. You lose your only window into what they know and where they're positioned. The windshield wipers moved back and forth. And if Reed is being coerced, Diana said from the back seat. Then we find that out too, Caleb said, and we handle it accordingly. Owen keyed his radio, not to Reed directly. To another team member, casual, a small course adjustment in the stated route, a waypoint 3 miles east of the road they were actually taking. False information, moving through a real channel, then they drove, and waited to see where it landed. Caleb saw it before the headlights fully reached it. A faint shimmer across the road surface, 200 yards ahead. The kind of thing you'd miss if you were watching the space above the road instead of the road itself. The kind of thing that looked, at first pass, like wet asphalt catching the light differently. Except wet asphalt didn't catch light in a perfectly even band straight across both lanes. Caleb said. Owen lifted his foot. What? Don't brake hard, ease it. The SUV came down to 20. Then 15. The headlights played forward and the shimmer resolved into something with texture and intention. A thin layer, edge to edge, distributed with a patience that rain didn't produce. Owen saw it, said nothing for 2 full seconds, then very quietly, "That's not rain," Caleb said. "Diesel or hydraulic fluid, one or the other, spread deliberately across both lanes in the approach to a curve with no guardrail and a 30-foot drop into a creek bed on the right side." Caleb looked at where it was positioned on the road, and something went cold in his chest, because he'd been wrong about something. He'd assumed reasonably, he'd thought, that a second trap was a contingency, a backup measure in case the first was found. But the position was wrong for that. This wasn't placed in response to the tire sabotage being discovered. This was 3 miles past it, staged at a specific geographic choke point on a specific alternate route. It had been placed here before tonight, which meant someone had built this in sequence. Stage 1, disable the vehicle's tire and brake system. Slow the convoy, force a security response. Stage 2, while the convoy responds to Stage 1 and redirects to the alternate route is already prepared. Because a professional security team's first instinct when the primary vehicle is compromised is to move to secondary routing. That instinct was the vulnerability. They'd planned for Diana's team to do exactly what Owen had done, and the alternate route was where Stage 2 had been waiting. Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, something more cold and professional than fear, a recognition of skill in the person on the other side of this. Because this was good. This was the kind of planning that meant there was almost certainly a third piece he hadn't found yet. "Guide me through it," Owen said, low. The voice of a man who had made a decision. "Straight line," Caleb said. "No steering corrections unless I tell you. Keep your hands loose, don't grip, just guide. Any adjustment has to be small and gradual. Fast movement and we're off the road, speed 10, maybe 12. Owen didn't argue. His hands adjusted on the wheel exactly as described. Not gripping, guiding. The SUV crept forward, into the shimmer. The change was immediate, subtle but immediate. The steering went soft, not gone, just disconnected from the road in the slight, treacherous way of surfaces that had stopped cooperating. The feeling of ice, but warmer, more deceptive. Diana was absolutely still in the back seat. "Easy," Caleb said. Owen drifting left. "I see it. Don't correct yet. Let it move. Wait for my word." The SUV moved left by maybe 8 inches. Slow watched the front right tire's relationship to the lane edge. Now left hand, Small, Owen adjusted, a quarter turn. Maybe less. The vehicle came back to center. Hold there. The shimmer continued under them. 15 feet, 20, 30. Then the surface changed. The grip came back. Owen felt it in his palms before he could have described what he was feeling. The return of friction, of the relationship between rubber and ground, that you only noticed when it came back after being gone. Clear, Caleb said. Owen exhaled once, short and controlled. In the back seat, Diana Ashford let out a breath that was the first fully unguarded sound Caleb had heard from her since the highway shoulder. Not fear, not relief exactly, just the sound of a person allowing themselves one moment of being human before reassembling. The radio crackled. Rear vehicles checking in. Owen guided them through one at a time, the same instructions, the same patience. 4 minutes. Felt like more. When the last vehicle cleared the slick section and Owen confirmed it on the radio, no one in the lead SUV said anything for a while. Then Diana said that was placed before tonight. Yes. Which means they expected us to take this route. They expected your team to redirect to secondary routing after the tire. That's standard. Caleb watched the road ahead. They built the plan around what a professional security detail would do. Owen, they studied our protocols. Yes. A silence, which means, Diana said slowly, there's something else. Caleb said, probably, not probably, almost certainly. But he said probably because he was still working out where it would be. And because stating certainty before you could support it was how you made people panic. And panic was what the plan on the other side was counting on. He kept watching the road. Nobody celebrated clearing the oil patch. That was something Caleb noticed and respected. No noise, no released tension. Owen just drove. Diana just sat. The convoy just moved. Because everyone in that vehicle was thinking the same thing, 2 down. What's 3? The rain had steadied into something patient. Not violent, just present. The tree lines thickened on both sides as the road dipped toward the junction area. The highway narrowed. The kind of narrowing that happened gradually enough that you didn't notice it until you were already committed. Owen's radio buzzed. The unit tracking the cargo van had followed it to a warehouse district on the east side of the city. Parked. No movement in or out. They were watching. Good. Caleb filed that away and kept his eyes on the road ahead. Diana's phone lit up again. She looked at it, and this time something happened on her face, small and fast. A tightening around the eyes, a fraction of a second, where the control she maintained like a second skin slipped before reasserting itself. Who is it? Owen said. Diana set the phone face down on her knee. Gerald, she said. The name landed in the car like something placed deliberately. Not dropped, placed. Owen's hands moved on the wheel, that small adjustment again. The one that wasn't about the road. Caleb turned slightly in his seat, not fully around, just enough. Who's Gerald? Neither of them answered immediately, which was the loudest possible answer. He let it sit. He didn't push. Some things came out when they were ready, and pushing only made them go deeper. He looked back at the road, watched the surface, watched the shoulders, watched the tree lines on both sides where the dark was complete and absolute, and could hold any number of things he wouldn't see until they moved. And then he saw the junction ahead. A blinking yellow light, 4-way stop. The kind that looked patient at night, the way rural intersections always did, like they'd been there long before you and would be there long after. And just past it, just barely visible at the edge of the headlight range, the outline of a sedan sitting wrong. Too still, too angled. Lights off but engine running. He could see the faint exhaust from the tailpipe catching the wet air. Positioned at exactly the angle that would force an approaching vehicle to correct left, where the shoulder dropped, where the ground was soft after hours of rain. Caleb looked at the approach geometry, looked at the drop angle of the shoulder, looked at the 4 vehicles behind them in close formation. The junction, he said. Owen, yeah, don't take it. Owen glanced at him. The alternate route requires. Someone calculated what your alternate route would be. That sedan is positioned to force a left correction on the approach. In these conditions, on this shoulder, with the convoy stacked behind us. Owen saw it. He saw it without Caleb finishing the sentence. Because Owen was good at his job, and good people at their jobs could recognize danger once someone pointed them at the right angle. The lead vehicle goes wide, Owen said. And what's behind it doesn't have time to correct. A beat. How do we go around it? Caleb had been watching the right side of the road for the last mile without letting himself acknowledge why. Now he knew why. Maintenance road, he said. Before the junction, service access for the power line clearing. About a half-mile back, no, coming 40 yards. There's a gap in the fence line on the right. Looks like nothing. Owen squinted through the windshield. I don't see. 3 dead oaks on the right side. The gap is just past them, packed gravel. It comes out on Route 11 south of the junction. Owen looked at the blinking yellow light ahead, at the sedan sitting wrong in the dark. If that road isn't there, it's there. You're asking me to take a convoy off-road in the dark based on what has happened twice tonight, and what I can see happening a third time in about 30 seconds if we keep going straight. Caleb kept his voice level. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to look at what's sitting at that junction and tell me what you think it's for. Owen looked. 3 seconds. 3 dead oaks, he said, right side. Owen keyed the radio, 3 words to his team. No explanation, just the instruction. And then he drove. Owen's radio buzzed. The unit tracking the cargo van had followed it to a warehouse district on the east side of the city. Parked. No movement in or out. They were watching. Good. Caleb filed that away and kept his eyes on the road ahead. Diana's phone lit up again. She looked at it, and this time something happened on her face. Small and fast. A tightening around the eyes. A fraction of a second, where the control she maintained like a second skin slipped before reasserting itself. Who is it? Owen said. Diana set the phone face down on her knee. Gerald, she said. The name landed in the car like something placed deliberately. Not dropped. Placed. Owen's hands moved on the wheel, that small adjustment again. The one that wasn't about the road. Caleb turned slightly in his seat, not fully around, just enough. Who's Gerald? Neither of them answered immediately, which was the loudest possible answer. He let it sit. He didn't push. Some things came out when they were ready, and pushing only made them go deeper. He looked back at the road, watched the surface, watched the shoulders, watched the tree lines on both sides where the dark was complete and could hold any number of things he wouldn't see until they moved. And then he saw the junction ahead. A blinking yellow light, 4-way stop. The kind that looked patient at night, the way rural intersections always did, like they'd been there long before you and would be there long after. And just past it, just barely visible at the edge of the headlight range, the outline of a sedan sitting wrong. Too still, too angled. Lights off but engine running. He could see the faint exhaust from the tailpipe catching the wet air. Positioned at exactly the angle that would force an approaching vehicle to correct left, where the shoulder dropped, where the ground was soft after hours of rain. Caleb looked at the approach geometry, looked at the drop angle of the shoulder, looked at the 4 vehicles behind them in close formation. The junction, he said. Owen, yeah, don't take it. Owen glanced at him. The alternate route requires. Someone calculated what your alternate route would be. That sedan is positioned to force a left correction on the approach. In these conditions on this shoulder, with the convoy stacked behind us. Owen saw it. He saw it without Caleb finishing the sentence. Because Owen was good at his job, and good people at their jobs could recognize danger once someone pointed them at the right angle. The lead vehicle goes wide, Owen said. And what's behind it doesn't have time to correct. A beat. How do we go around it? Caleb had been watching the right side of the road for the last mile without letting himself acknowledge why. Now he knew why. Maintenance road, he said. Before the junction, service access for the power line clearing. About a half-mile back, no, coming 40 yards. There's a gap in the fence line on the right. Looks like nothing. Owen squinted through the windshield. I don't see. 3 dead oaks on the right side. The gap is just past them, packed gravel. It comes out on Route 11 south of the junction. Owen looked at the blinking yellow light ahead, at the sedan sitting wrong in the dark. If that road isn't there, it's there. You're asking me to take a convoy off-road in the dark based on what has happened twice tonight, and what I can see happening a third time in about 30 seconds if we keep going straight. Caleb kept his voice level. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to look at what's sitting at that junction and tell me what you think it's for. Owen looked. 3 seconds. 3 dead oaks, he said, right side. Owen keyed the radio, 3 words to his team. No explanation. Just the instruction, and then he drove. The gap in the fence was exactly where Caleb said it was. The 3 dead oaks appeared in the headlights, pale, stripped, leaning slightly toward the road. The gap was just past them. A break in the fence line that looked, at speed, like a shadow between posts. Owen didn't slow down to reconsider. He turned. The SUV bounced hard over the entry grade and then settled onto packed gravel that was rough but solid. Built for utility vehicles. No interest in comfort. It had been here for decades. Branches scraped the left side panel. Owen winced. Diana said nothing about the branches. The road curved left through the tree line, ran parallel to the highway for about 300 yards, then bent right and descended gently toward Route 11. The headlights swept through dense undergrowth and came out onto clean asphalt. Owen merged south, checked his mirrors. 1, 2, 3, 4. All 4 convoy vehicles, intact, moving. He let out one short breath. Then he drove for 30 seconds without speaking. Caleb understood that those 30 seconds weren't silence. They were Owen processing what had just happened and deciding something about the man sitting next to him. 3 dead trees on the right, Owen said finally. Yes, you spotted that road coming in from the highway in the rain at night. I spotted it when we turned onto this route. Logged it. Owen was quiet for a moment. Then where exactly did you serve? Caleb looked out at the road unwinding ahead. The city lights were beginning to show on the horizon. Not close yet. But there. Vehicle protection unit, he said. Attached to force mobility operations, we studied convoy failures, every incident report we could access. We built models for how routes failed, how vehicles failed, how security protocols became vulnerabilities. And you applied that tonight. The principles don't change. The road changes, the equipment changes, the principles don't. Owen absorbed this, and you walked away from it, he said. I walked toward something else. Sophie was born. Claire didn't make it through. I had a 9-year-old reason to be somewhere other than wherever that work took me. He paused. Same motion, different direction. Owen said nothing, because some things deserved quiet instead of response. The radio buzzed. Owen answered, listened, looked at the road. Then he lowered the radio and said without inflection, That's Reed. The name sat in the car. Diana leaned forward. Owen said, He came back on the channel. He says, a pause. He says they have his son. The words were simple, short, and they changed the weight of everything in the vehicle immediately and completely. Reed Callahan. 11 years. The man who'd coordinated the last-minute stop. Who'd known about the schedule change in real time. Who had been, for some number of weeks, the conduit between Diana's itinerary and whoever had used it to build tonight. Not a traitor. A father who had run out of doors. Caleb understood that distinction the way he understood most things, not with his head first. With the part of him that lived below the head. The part that knew, without needing to calculate it, that there was no version of himself that wouldn't burn everything down to keep Sophie safe. He didn't excuse what Reed had done, but he knew what had done it. Get him back on the line, Caleb said. Tell him the convoy is safe. Tell him we know the situation and we're not coming after him. We need a location. Where is the son? Owen, he might not, he will. Because right now he thinks he's choosing between 2 bad options and you can take one of them off the table. Caleb kept his voice steady. Tell him cooperation protects his son. That's what he needs to hear. Owen keyed the radio. The response took 3 minutes. 3 long minutes in which the convoy rolled through the outer edge of the city, and the buildings began replacing tree lines, and Diana Ashford sat in the back seat, with her hands folded in her lap, and her expression doing the precise work of a woman holding many things together by force of will. Then Reed's voice came through, unsteady. Young-sounding in a way his voice probably hadn't sounded in years. The voice of someone who had been carrying something for too long, and had just been told it was possible, maybe, to put it down. He gave an address, East Side. A warehouse that had been empty since a distribution company closed 18 months ago. Owen relayed it to city police in 2 sentences, then set the radio down. And for the first time since Caleb had watched him step out of a black SUV on a highway shoulder with his hand near his sidearm, Owen Strickland's shoulders dropped. Not much. Just fractionally. The physical release of a tension he'd been holding without naming. Caleb didn't say anything about it. Some things you let a person have without comment. Diana spoke from the back seat, quiet, more to herself than to either of them. He's been living with this. Yes, Caleb said. For how long? Long enough that it became the shape of his life. That's how these things work. The first day is impossible. By the time enough days have passed, impossible becomes just what you do. Diana looked at her hands. I would have fired him, she said. If I'd known, I know, and now. Caleb looked at the city lights growing ahead of them, at the wet streets beginning to show traffic signals, and the signs of a place still awake, indifferent to what had happened on the roads outside it. Now you know more than you did before, he said. What you do with it is yours to decide. She was quiet for a long moment. Then her phone lit up again. Gerald. She looked at it. This time she answered. Her voice was extraordinary, warm. Slightly tired in the way of someone who'd been traveling and was nearly home. The precise performance of a woman with no reason for alarm. Gerald, I was just about to call you. Long night. Gerald's voice came through the speaker, compressed and tinny. Concern, he'd been trying to reach her. He'd heard there was some kind of delay. Was everything all right? Heard? From whom? Diana said everything was fine. Minor logistical issue, fully resolved. She'd see him at the board meeting in the morning. She hung up, sat back, said nothing for 30 seconds then. How long has he been watching me? Not to Owen. Not to Caleb. To the question itself. Caleb turned slightly. You suspect him specifically, he said. Not just someone on the board. Him. Her voice when it came was entirely even, which was its own kind of answer. The missing documents from the audit archive. Physically removed. She looked at her phone on her knee. Gerald helped me design that archive system 14 years ago. He knows how it's organized, which means he knows exactly what to remove and where to put it so it disappears, without knowing what you're searching for. Owen from the front, Diana. If Gerald is involved at the level we're describing, I know, then tonight wasn't the first time he's moved against you. A silence, long, the kind that had weight in it. Warren's accident, Owen said carefully, 7 years ago. If Gerald? One word. He stopped. She looked out the window at the city coming toward them, at the lights on wet streets, at the reflection of everything in the dark glass. I know, she said again. And from the weight of those two words, Caleb understood this was not new territory for her. That somewhere in the 7 years since her husband died on a road she hadn't been on, something had never fully resolved. Something she'd folded up and placed somewhere she could function around it. Because unfolding it completely was a level of loss that made everything else feel manageable by comparison. Her husband, her brother, the company she'd built in the silence after. Caleb looked back at the road. The city checkpoint appeared ahead. 2 police cruisers with lights running, waiting exactly where Diana had arranged them, in a call she'd made while he was talking Owen through the oil patch. While the SUV was doing 10 miles an hour across a slick road in the dark, Owen pulled up to the checkpoint. Brief exchange. Then they were through, moving into the final approach to the city center. Caleb looked at his phone and checked the time. Just past 1 in the morning. He'd left the garage at 7:53, called Sophie at 8:15. Stopped on the shoulder at 8:22. Over 4 hours, Sophie would be asleep. The front light would still be on. She never turned it off until she heard the truck in the driveway. That was a rule she'd made for herself without telling him, and he'd noticed it after the 3rd or 4th time he'd come home late and found it burning. He'd been gone for considerably longer than 30 minutes. She was going to have thoughts about this, detailed thoughts, presented over breakfast with the focused intensity she brought to everything she considered worth addressing. He almost smiled. Diana was watching him in the mirror. He could feel it without looking. You're thinking about her, she said. Yes, what's she like? He thought about how to answer that honestly. Sophie wasn't a type or a category. She was a person who happened to be 9 years old. She's very certain, he said, about most things. She has strong opinions about how pasta should be cooked and whether people are worth trusting. And she's usually right. About people especially? About people especially. Diana was quiet. Then, the softest she'd sounded all night. You should go home to her. Soon. Tonight, Caleb. When this is finished. He looked at her in the mirror, understanding that she meant something larger than logistics. That she was saying, in the language of a woman who had built everything to avoid stopping, stop, go home. The quiet is not the enemy. Yes, he said. The convoy slowed. The Ashford Capitol building came into view. 42 floors of glass and intention, lit from inside on the executive levels, figures visible through the ground floor windows. They were almost there. 2 traps down. One name beginning to take shape. And somewhere east of the city, at an address Reed Callahan had given them in a shaking voice, a boy was about to be found. Caleb watched the building get closer. Ahead, clear, for now. The Ashford Capitol building was 42 floors of glass and intention. It stood at the end of Meridian Boulevard like something that had decided it belonged there, and simply waited for the city to catch up. At 2:30 in the morning, it was lit from inside. Not fully, just the lobby and the upper executive floors. The kind of lighting that said certain people never actually stopped working. They just changed locations. The convoy pulled into the private entrance on the north side, one by one. 4 vehicles that had survived a night that was not supposed to be survivable. Owen cut the engine. Nobody moved for a moment. That happened sometimes. After something, the body needed a beat to register that the forward motion could stop. That it was permitted now to simply sit inside the stillness without bracing for the next thing. Then doors opened. People moved. Security personnel from inside the building came out through the glass lobby doors. Owen's team established positions. Radios crackled in the shorthand of professionals who were very good at their jobs and were currently processing the fact that their jobs had very nearly failed tonight. Caleb stepped out last. The air was cold, wet. Pre-dawn cold sat differently than nighttime cold. Heavier, more direct, like the dark was finally being honest about what it was. He set his tool bag on the ground beside the vehicle, rolled his shoulders once, looked up at the building. 42 floors. He'd been inside buildings like this before. Different cities, different circumstances. The same fundamental geometry of power, everything proportioned to established scale before you'd spoken to anyone. The lobby ceiling 20 feet high. The reception desk, designed to make you aware of the distance you'd need to cross to reach it. He picked up his tool bag. Diana Ashford stepped out beside him. She'd been on her phone during the final approach, and she was still on it now. A conversation conducted in the clipped, precise language of someone issuing instructions to people who didn't need context, only directions. She finished the call, lowered the phone, looked at the building. Then she looked at Caleb. "They're bringing Reed in," she said. "Owen's team picked him up 10 minutes ago. How is he?" Recuperating. A pause, completely. Caleb nodded. "And the boy?" Diana's expression shifted, just slightly. The way it shifted when something got through the architecture. "They found him 40 minutes ago. The warehouse address Reed gave us. He's at St. Catherine's now. A beat. He's all right. Dehydrated, frightened, but all right." Caleb let that sit for a moment. A 12-year-old boy in a warehouse with a space heater and granola bars. 19 days. And his father coming to work every morning, standing in rooms with Owen, answering questions about logistics and scheduling, and carrying that weight alone because the instruction had been very clear about what happened if he didn't. "Good," Caleb said. "Just that." Diana looked at him for a moment. Then she walked toward the entrance, and Owen fell into position beside her, and the convoy of people who had been through something together moved inside out of the cold. Caleb followed. Because he wasn't finished yet. He just wasn't entirely sure what he was waiting to finish. They brought Reed Callahan in at 2:15. Not in handcuffs. Owen had made that call quietly, before they'd left the vehicles. A single instruction to the team member handling the pickup. No cuffs. Because Owen Strickland, for all his professional rigidity, understood a distinction that mattered. Reed wasn't a prisoner. He was a complication. And complications deserved to be handled with enough precision to know what they actually were before you treated them like something else. Reed looked like what he was, 42 years old, medium height. The kind of face that didn't register at first glance, and then registered completely on the second. Tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix, scared in the way of someone who had been waiting for a specific door to open for a long time, and was now watching it open and didn't know yet what was standing on the other side. He'd been carrying this for 19 days, 19 days of coming to work, of answering Owen's morning briefings, of coordinating schedules and advance sweeps and route confirmations, of being the person everyone trusted with the logistics of keeping Diana Ashford safe, while feeding the information that made her unsafe. Owen met him in the small conference room off the main lobby, not across a table, at the corner of it. That placement mattered. Caleb noticed it through the glass panel in the door and understood that Owen had thought about it. Caleb stood in the hallway outside, not because anyone had asked him to stay out, because this wasn't his room to be in. This was a conversation between two men who had worked together for 11 years. And one of them had just spent 19 days doing the unthinkable, and whatever happened in that room needed to happen without an audience. He watched through the glass. Reed's hands were on the table, still, the stillness of someone who had decided not to hide anything anymore. Who was past the point where hiding served any purpose. Owen leaned forward, said something. Reed looked up, said something back. Then Reed put his face in his hands, not crying. Or maybe crying. It was hard to tell through glass at this distance. But the shape of it, the way his shoulders moved, the way he stayed that way for a long moment while Owen sat beside him without moving, said enough. Caleb turned away from the glass, sat down on a bench against the hallway wall, put his head back, closed his eyes. Not sleeping, just stopping. The first time in hours he'd been able to stop completely, and his body registered it with the immediate insistence of something that had been waiting for permission. He thought about Reed in that room, about what 19 days looked like from the inside. Day one, when the call came and the photo arrived, and the instruction was given and the math was done in a single terrible minute, and the only answer the math produced was this one. Day two, when you went to work anyway because the alternative was worse. Day 6, when it started feeling like a thing you were doing instead of a thing that was being done to you. Day 14, when you stopped being able to clearly remember what you'd been like before day 1. He didn't excuse it. But he understood the arithmetic. And understanding the arithmetic was not the same as excusing the outcome. He'd learned that distinction over years and miles and a lot of situations that didn't have good options. It was one of the few things from that previous life he'd brought forward intact. Diana appeared at the end of the hallway, perhaps 20 minutes after Caleb had sat down. She walked toward him without hurrying, sat down on the bench beside him, not across from him, beside him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The building hummed around them, ventilation, lighting systems, an elevator somewhere moving between floors, the sounds of a structure that didn't know or care what was happening inside it. Reed's son is at the hospital, Diana said. Precautionary, he's going to be fine, good. She looked at the glass door, at Reed and Owen visible through it. He's been doing this for 19 days, she said. Yes, coming to work, answering my questions, sitting in security briefings, a pause, telling them where I was going to be. Yes. And he did it because they had his son. Caleb kept his voice even, and because when someone has your child and gives you an instruction, you follow it. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll find another way, and every day that passes, the other way gets harder to see. Diana was quiet for a moment. You sound like you've thought about this. I have a 9-year-old daughter, he said. I've thought about it. She looked at him. What would you have done? He didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't know, because the honest answer was the kind you didn't say quickly. The same thing, he said. And I'd have hated myself for it, and I'd have done it anyway. Diana looked back at the glass door. I don't know what to do with that, she said. You don't have to know tonight, he said. Tonight you just have to get to morning. The detail that broke it open came at 3:47. Owen had left the conference room about an hour after sitting down with Reed, once the initial interview was complete and Reed had said everything he had to say. He'd transferred Reed to another team member and gone upstairs to where his analyst was working. A back office on the 14th floor that had been running the digital trace on the communication chain since they'd arrived at the building. When Owen came back down, he walked directly to Caleb in the hallway, not to Diana, to Caleb first, which said something about the order in which Owen had decided to do things. He showed Caleb his phone, a name on the screen. Caleb read it, then looked up. You already knew, he said. Not a question. I've suspected, Owen said, for about 3 weeks. Since Diana started the preliminary review of the audit records. He looked at the wall, then back at Caleb. There was nothing I could bring to her that was concrete. Nothing that rose to the level of I couldn't walk into her office and tell her I suspected her brother without it being about Warren, Caleb said. Owen stopped. What do you know about Warren? He said carefully. I know he died 7 years ago in an accident. I know Diana said his name in the car in a way that meant she's been carrying something about it. And I know that when you started to bring it up earlier, she stopped you. Caleb looked at him. So either the accident wasn't an accident, or she's always wondered if it was, or both. Owen exhaled slowly through his nose. Both, he said. And Gerald was in a position to. Gerald managed Warren's personal security for 2 years before Warren died. Owen's voice was completely flat, the flatness of someone who had been holding this carefully for a long time. The accident was investigated, determined to be mechanical failure, brake system. No evidence of tampering was found. Caleb looked at him. No evidence was found, he said. By investigators who weren't looking for the right things. Owen said nothing, which was the same as saying yes. The shell company, Caleb said, 4 years old. The audit records that went missing covered investments from 5 years ago. Gerald started building his exit before Diana even began looking. Which means he knew she'd get there eventually, Owen said. He knows how she thinks. He helped her design the archive system. He knows her processes. He knows her instincts. Caleb looked at the conference room door. He knew that if he gave her enough time, she'd find the gap. So he built a way out before she started looking, and when it became clear she was getting close, he decided a way out wasn't enough. Owen looked at the hallway floor. He called her 6 times tonight, Owen said, starting around 11:30, around the time the convoy would have been approaching the bridge curve. If the plan had worked. He was checking, Caleb said. Yes, and now he's been checking for several hours and not getting the answer he expected. Yes. Caleb stood up from the bench, picked up his tool bag. You need to tell her, he said. And then you need to move quickly. Because he's been waiting for a confirmation that hasn't come. And at some point he's going to decide that waiting is no longer the right move. Owen nodded. Once, the nod of a man who had known this was coming and was done not doing it. He walked to the office where Diana was, knocked twice, went in. Caleb stayed in the hallway, sat back down. Closed his eyes again. 18 minutes. That was how long it took. He tracked it without meaning to. Some habits were too deep to turn off. She came out at 4:11. Owen stayed inside, already on calls. He could hear the low, efficient rhythm of them through the closed door. FBI field office, company legal counsel, board members who were about to have a very unusual morning. Diana closed the door behind her. Stood in the hallway, saw Caleb on the bench, sat down beside him again, the same bench, the same position. But entirely different from the first time, 20 minutes ago, because she was carrying something different now. Something that had a name and a history, and 7 years of everything she'd built on top of it. She didn't speak immediately, he didn't prompt her. The hallway was the same as before. The building hummed, the ventilation ran. The elevator moved somewhere in the distance. Gerald started the shell company 4 years ago, she said, before I began the preliminary audit review. Before I made any visible move toward investigating the investments. He knew you'd get there eventually, Caleb said. Yes. A breath. He knows how I think. He's known how I think for 40 years. She stopped, looked at her hands in her lap. He was in the room when they told me about Warren. He drove me to the hospital. He sat with me through the night. She paused for a long moment. He held my hand. Caleb said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't make it smaller. And this was not something that should be made smaller. I built the company after Warren died, she said. Everyone said it was how I processed grief. And having purpose. Moving forward. She looked at the wall across from them. For the first 2 years, maybe it was. And after that, it was just motion. Because if I stopped moving, I'd have to feel how quiet everything had become. She stopped again. Caleb waited. Gerald was there for every piece of it, she said. Every acquisition, every board meeting. Every crisis that needed managing. He was the first person I called when something went wrong. The last one I'd have suspected of. She didn't finish the sentence. Warren's accident. The brake system. Her voice was completely even. The evenness of someone who had rehearsed this privately in the dark many times. I always thought, I never said it out loud. To anyone. You knew, Caleb said. Not a question. Not an accusation. Just the fact of it, stated quietly. She was still for a moment. I didn't let myself know, she said. There's a difference. Yes, he said. There is. They sat in that for a while. The building hummed. The investigators who looked at Warren's accident, she said. They found no evidence of tampering. They weren't looking for the right things, Caleb said. And by the time anyone looked, the vehicle had been sitting in an impound lot for weeks, in the rain. He paused. Certain kinds of modifications are designed to degrade after they've done their job, so that by the time anyone with the right knowledge looks, there's nothing left to find. Diana turned her head and looked at him directly. You know this, she said. Specifically, yes, because of your work. Because I spent years studying how vehicles failed and why and who built the failures in. He held her gaze. The technique used on your car tonight, the brake line modification specifically, I've seen that configuration before, in training materials that were never released outside a specific defense program. A pause. Someone who planned tonight had access to knowledge that very few people have. Diana's eyes sharpened. You said that in the car, that the person who planned tonight had military-level knowledge. Yes, Gerald served, she said. Army. Before the company. He doesn't talk about it. He never talked about it. She looked at the wall. I never asked. Caleb said nothing, because the picture was complete now, or complete enough. And there was nothing left to build toward, only the weight of it to sit with for a moment before the next set of things had to happen. I'm sorry, he said. She looked at him. He didn't say it often. He'd learned to be careful with it. But he meant it the way you meant things when you'd seen enough of the world to understand what loss actually cost. For which part? She said. All of it, he said. Warren. The company you built in the wrong direction tonight. He paused. The 40 years of a brother you thought you had. She looked at her hands. For a long moment she was very still. Then she said, Owen thinks I should take a leave after this, after the board meeting, after the investigation is underway. What do you think? I think I've been in motion for 7 years and I don't know what I look like standing still. You look like a person, Caleb said. That's all. Same as everyone else when they stop. She almost smiled. Almost. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, he said. It's just true. She looked at him for a moment. Something in her expression that he couldn't quite name. Not softness, exactly. More like recognition. The look of someone encountering something they'd forgotten existed. How do you do it? She said. The quiet. You said in the car that it stopped feeling like loss eventually. How long did that take? He thought about it honestly. About 3 years, he said. Before it started feeling like space instead. Room for other things. He paused. And it still feels like loss sometimes. That doesn't go away. But it stops being the only thing in the room. She was quiet. Sophie, she said. Yes, Sophie helped. Because she needed you. Because she needed me. And because she made the quiet feel inhabited. Like it had someone in it. He looked at the hallway floor. You can't fill it with a company. I don't think. I think the company just makes the quiet louder. Diana Ashford, CEO of 42 Floors of Glass and Intention, sat on a bench in a hallway at 4 in the morning and said nothing for a while. And Caleb Merritt, who had stopped on the side of a road 3 hours ago, because he couldn't make himself keep driving, sat beside her and let the nothing be enough. Gerald Ashford was taken into custody at 4:58 in the morning. At his apartment on the west side of the city, 12 blocks from the building where his sister was sitting in a hallway. Still dressed, still awake. His phone, when the agents looked at it later, showed 23 outgoing calls since midnight. Diana's number. Several others that would take the FBI the better part of a week to fully trace. He had opened the door when the agents knocked. Had looked at the people standing there. Had said nothing. Had turned and walked to the kitchen and sat down at the table and waited. Like someone who had been waiting for this particular door for a long time. Like someone for whom the waiting, finally being over, was its own complicated kind of relief. Owen brought the news and told Diana quietly. She received it with the same stillness she'd received most of the night's information. Not detached, not cold. Just the composure of a woman who had been preparing for something for years and was now on the other side of it, and didn't yet know what that felt like. His apartment, she said. Yes, he was home, he was just sitting there, yes. She nodded slowly. Said nothing else about it. Caleb had moved to the lobby by then, standing near the entrance, his tool bag beside him on the floor, watching the street through the glass. The city at 5 in the morning was a different city than the one at midnight. Quieter, but with the first suggestion of the day beginning in the lightening at the eastern edge of the sky. Owen came to stand beside him. Reed, Owen said. Yeah, he gave us everything, not just the address, the whole chain. How he was approached, who contacted him, the structure of the operation. Owen looked at the street. Everything Gerald needed him to pass, every piece of it, Reed kept records of. In a personal email account. He said he wanted there to be evidence, in case something happened to him. Caleb looked at the street. He was building a way out, he said. Even while he was doing it, he just didn't know when to use it. He was waiting until his son was safe, yes. Owen was quiet for a moment. 11 years, he said. Not to Caleb. Just to the air. You'll decide what to do with him. I don't know what to do with him. Yes, you do, Caleb said. You're just not ready to decide yet. That's different. Owen turned and looked at him. The look of a man who had been sizing someone up since a highway shoulder in the rain, and had arrived at a conclusion. You know, Owen said, when you walked onto that shoulder tonight, I thought you were either a threat or somebody's problem. Reasonable. You had grease on your hands. Still do. Owen looked at the tool bag. She's going to offer you something, he said. Consulting, advisory, something formal. She doesn't ask often. She builds structures so she doesn't have to ask. But she's going to ask. I know. Think about it seriously. I will. Owen nodded once, went back inside. Caleb stayed at the glass. Watched the street. Watched the sky at the edges. The dark making small concessions to morning. Not light yet, but the absence of absolute dark. The place between. Diana appeared in the lobby behind him. He saw her reflection in the glass before he turned around. She walked toward him without hurrying. No phone in her hand. No agenda visible on her face. Just a woman who had been through something long and had arrived at the other side of it. She stopped a few feet away, looked at him the way she'd looked at him on the highway shoulder, but different now. Not assessing, not calculating, something quieter than either. The FBI gets here at 7, she said. Owen told me, and the board meeting is at 9. I know. She looked at her hands for a moment, then back at him. The people who planned tonight studied everything about me, she said. My schedule, my route, my team's protocols, my contingency procedures. She paused. They were thorough. They were patient. They built something that should have worked. Yes, he said. They didn't plan for you. No. They didn't plan for a man who stopped on the side of a road because he couldn't make himself keep driving. That's usually how it goes, he said. The thing that breaks a careful plan isn't another careful plan. It's the unaccounted for. You're not unaccounted for, she said. Random doesn't notice brake lines. Random doesn't read maintenance roads in the dark. The stopping was random, he said. Everything after that was just what I know. She held his gaze. Then she extended her hand. He shook it. Her grip the same as it had been on the highway shoulder. Firm, no performance. The handshake of someone who meant it. I'm going to call you in a few days, she said, when things are processed. Owen told me that too. Of course he did. Something briefly warm in her expression. Think about it. I will. She held his hand for just a beat longer than a handshake required. Then she let go. Caleb, yeah, thank you for stopping. He looked at her for a moment. Keep the lights on, he said. In the building. It doesn't have to be the only thing, but it can still be something. She understood that. He could see it. She nodded once. Then she turned and walked back into the building. Back to the work. Back to 9 o'clock. Back to the thing that was still hers, even if she'd built it for the wrong reasons for a while. Because 9 o'clock was not going to wait. And Diana Ashford had never been the kind of woman who let things she could control slip past her. Caleb watched her go through the glass. Then he picked up his tool bag and walked out into the morning. He got his truck back first. A police unit that Owen had arranged drove him out to mile marker 14 on the highway. His truck sat exactly where he'd left it. Faithful and unglamorous hazard lights still running, patient in the early gray. He turned the lights off, got in, started the engine, listened to it catch. He sat for a moment in the silence of the cab. The rain had stopped. The highway was empty. The sky was doing the slow work of becoming morning. Gradations he couldn't quite name, somewhere between black and gray, moving without announcing itself. He drove. No radio, just the engine and the road and the particular quiet of an hour that belonged to no one. He thought about Reed Callahan. About the arithmetic a person did when the arithmetic had no good answer. About what it meant to carry something for 19 days and still come to work. Still function. Still be to everyone around you, the person they'd always known. He didn't excuse it. But he understood the weight. He thought about Owen. About 11 years of trust tested against 19 days of impossible circumstance. About how the math of that didn't come out clean and probably never would. about the fact that Owen already knew what he was going to do. He just needed the night to be over first. He thought about Diana, about what it meant to build 42 floors of forward motion over a question you'd never let yourself ask out loud. About the board meeting at 9, and the empty chair, and the moment when she'd walk into that room knowing everything she now knew, and still run the meeting because that was who she was. About a woman who had said keep the lights on and understood what he meant by it. He turned onto his street as the first real light of morning was beginning to arrive. Not dramatic, not sudden. Just there, slowly, the way mornings always came. Before you noticed the transition, it had already happened. The same houses, the same parked cars. The oak tree in the front yard that had lost half its shape in a storm 2 years back and was still growing into whatever it was going to be next. And at the end of the block, his house. Small, white, a light on in the kitchen window that hadn't been on when he left. And the porch light on. He pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, sat in the quiet for a moment. The cooling engine ticked. A bird somewhere in the oak tree made a sound, the first sound of the day, testing the morning. Then the front door opened. Sophie stood in the doorway in her star pajamas. The ones that hid above her wrists now, but that she refused to give up because she said they still fit, which was technically true if you ignored certain evidence. Hair on one side, eyes not quite all the way awake. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She stepped back to let him in. He walked up the porch steps, through the door. The house smelled like coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long, made by a 9-year-old who had learned the machine and applied that knowledge with complete commitment and imperfect results. He took off his jacket, set his tool bag by the door. Sophie stood in the kitchen doorway watching him with the patient, cataloging attention she'd had since she was old enough to pay attention to anything. "You were gone a long time," she said. "I know. You didn't call after the first time, I know." "I'm sorry." She considered this, accepted it with the grace of a child who understood that some apologies were the best available and you took them. "I made coffee," she said. "It might be a little. I'll drink it." "Okay." She poured 2 mugs. One full. One with exactly the inch she was allowed on mornings that qualified, which she had apparently decided this one did. They sat down at the kitchen table. The yellow wall behind Sophie was slightly uneven on the left side, where she'd helped paint it 2 summers ago, pushing the roller with more enthusiasm than precision. He'd let her, of course he'd let her. The coffee was terrible. He drank it like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. Because right now it was. Sophie watched him over the rim of her mug, that watching she did, patient, complete, nothing escaping it. "You look different," she said. Tired, not just tired, 9 years old. Star pajamas with short sleeves. An inch of badly made coffee. The kitchen they'd painted together. The house that was not yet the house in the drawing but was getting there, one paid invoice at a time. "Someone needed help," he said. "Did you help them?" "Yes." "Were they okay?" He thought about Diana walking back through the lobby at 5 in the morning. About the board meeting at 9. About a chair that would be empty and a room full of people who didn't yet understand what that meant. "They're going to be," he said. Sophie nodded, drank her inch of coffee with great seriousness. Then she put the mug down. "Dad?" "Yeah, you always look like that when you help someone." "Like what?" She thought about it. "Getting it exactly right. Like you're pretending it wasn't a big deal," she said. "But your eyes are doing something different than your face." He looked at his daughter. This specific particular person who had arrived in the world on the same day Claire had left it. Who had been from the very first morning the most complete reason he'd ever had to do anything, or keep going when keeping going was the harder choice. "Go get ready for school," he said. "Dad, Sophie, you're doing the name voice." "What name voice?" "The one where my name means end of conversation." "Because it means end of conversation." She sighed. The sigh of a 9-year-old who has made her point and chosen magnanimously not to press it. She got up, took her mug to the sink. At the kitchen doorway she stopped, didn't turn around. "Dad, yeah. I'm glad you came home." He looked at the yellow wall, at the uneven left side, at the evidence of small hands that had wanted to help and been allowed to. "Me too, Soph," he said. "Me too." She went down the hall. He sat alone in the kitchen, the bad coffee. The morning light coming through the window over the sink. The sound of the house settling into another day. And across the city at 9 o'clock exactly, Diana Ashford walked into the Ashford Capital Board meeting. sat down at the head of the table, looked at 11 people who had read the morning alerts and were trying to arrange their faces appropriately. Gerald's chair was empty. Nobody asked about it. The meeting began. Caleb sat at his kitchen table with a folded drawing in his shirt pocket, a house labeled Our House, Future, and let the morning be what it was. Quiet, full, enough. He'd stopped for a flat tire. Everything after that was what he knew, and he'd known enough.